This is the invocation for peace. Om Bhadram Karne Vishunuyama Devaha Bhadram Pasyeemakshabhiryajatraha Sthirairangaihi Stuštuvasam Sthanubhihi Vyasema Devakidam Yadayuh. Om Almighty Gods, let us be capable of performing our responsibilities and duties and hear auspicious sounds with our ears and see auspicious forms with our eyes, with strong and steady limbs and body, remaining and prayerful. Let us spend our God-given life directing our minds to only auspicious things. Om peace, peace, peace. We have been dealing with this second chapter of the text on the Upanishad, Mandukya Karika. Now, when the Advaitin, the non-dualist philosopher, established that all the experiences of waking and dream states are relative or non-eternal, then the question arises, who is the witness, the subject, the seer, the experiencer of all these manifold phenomena, all these experiences? Now that will ultimately take us to the question of the mystery of creation in Vedanta. And while explaining the mystery of creation, the Vedantins argue that in the ultimate sense, this creation is not absolutely real. In the Vedantic texts, translations, you may come across statements like the creation is illusory, the creation is like a dream, the creation is unreal. Such terms you find. The meaning should be kept in mind. When the Vedantins argue that this creation is not real, what he means is this. What he means is that this creation is not absolutely real. It doesn't remain in the same way throughout the past, present and future. Anything which is of changing nature cannot be absolutely real. It can be real only in the relative sense. But from the absolute point of view, the relativity of relative existence is not different from the absolutely unreal. That's a point to be kept in mind. So in the 11th verse that we were dealing with last time, the question was put by a different school of thought, not Vedantists, most probably Buddhists. They asked the question, Ubhayorapi Vaidathyam Vedanam Sthanayor Yati Ka etan Buddhyade Vedan Ko Vai Tesham Vikalpakaha. This is the question. Explaining in detail, Ubhayoho Sthanayoho Api Vedanam Yadi Vaidathyam Tarhi Kaha etan Vedan Buddhyate Ko Vai Tesham Vikalpakaha. Now, if creation is not real, and if waking state experiences are as unreal as dream experiences, then who is the one who imagines all these things? Who is the one who mistakes the real for the unreal. Atman or consciousness is the only reality, and there is nothing else which can be called absolutely real. All other entities that we wrongly consider to be real are only superimpositions on the Atman. Because when we consider this world to be absolutely real, then we are actually superimposing the world upon the absolutely real Atman. Just as when we mistake a piece of rope for the snake, we are superimposing snake upon the rope. In this text, the great philosopher Gaudapada describes 36 types of superimpositions. It will be astounding. See what a diverse philosophical tradition he had witnessed during his lifetime. He refers to 35, according to some scholars, 36 schools of thinkers, philosophers, who mistake something other than Atman, other than consciousness, to be the absolute reality. That is how the text continues. 36 different types of superimpositions are explained from the verse 20 to 28. These 8-9 verses refer to 36 minor schools of thought prevailing during the time of this order. Now, we will deal with that subject when we come to 20th verse. Now we are just dealing with the 12th verse. So in answer to the question as to who is the witness, is everything is unreal, is everything is relative or illusory, then who is the witness, who is the experiencer, the seer, the subject? Now the answer to this question is this. Advaitins or non-dualist school of philosophers say that Atman or Brahman is the eternal witness, the eternal subject, the eternal experiencer, the eternal seer. Atman is the only reality. Atman by its own Maya will explain later, projects all these manifold phenomena. So, in other words, the objects do not have an existence independent of the subject. Subject itself projects itself as the objects. But this will be realized only at the level of experience. And this subject, this witness, this seer or experiencer is the immanent principle, immanent reality, existing in all beings, and it is the same principle which is the all-pervading, omnipresent reality which is everywhere. So, other than Atman, other than consciousness, there is nothing that we can think of. So, an answer to this question, in the 12th verse, the author says, Kalpayedi atmana atmanam atma devasya mayaya sa eva buddhide bhedan iti vedanta nischayaka. This is the verse. So the answer is this. The author says, Devaha, as I said earlier, the word Deva, word used as a synonym of Atman, or Brahman. Deva actually means the reality who illumines the entire world, which answers our prayers, and which is the supreme illuminator of everything in this world, which doesn't require anything else to illumine itself. It is the self-effulgent. It is the self-effulgence itself. All the effulgence and illumination that we can think of derives its existence, its origin from this Atman. So, the answer is this. This Atman, which is self-luminous, through his own Maya, imagines in himself, by himself, all these manifold entities, all these various entities. Not only things that are visible, but also things which are not visible but deeply felt. So our thoughts, our impressions, our tendencies, happiness, misery, all these. These are internal, invisible things. And also external, visible, manifold entities. All these are the results of imaginations. Atman itself imagines through his own Maya. We'll explain this point, this Maya now. And he alone cognizes. So he projects all these manifold entities, and then that Atman reflects through the intellect of these created beings. So when this Atman manifests through the intellect of all these created beings, that mechanism becomes the cognizer. So the Atman alone cognizes everything. Who cognizes? When a person's soul leaves the body, his eyes may be all right, his limbs may be all right, but then he can't cognize anything. Something leaves him or her. So Atman itself creates these manifold phenomena, and Atman or consciousness itself acts as the cognizer, the subject, the seer, the witness, and the experiencer of things which he himself projects. Now this is the conclusion of Vedanta. Here we have to remember there is a word used here, Swamayaya, Atman by his own Maya. See, in Vedanta, the material cause of this world and the efficient cause of this world are the same. Suppose, a person makes a cloth. You can't say the efficient cause, the one who weaves the cloth, and the cloth, which is the effect. And also the cotton threads out of which he creates this. All are the same. We can't imagine in the empirical phenomena. But in Vedanta, one important principle is the material cause and efficient cause. The cause and effect are the same. Which means there is no effect independent of the cause. Cause itself is mistaken to be the effect. I explained this much earlier through the example of a goldsmith. A goldsmith, when he looks at various ornaments made of gold, he would see only gold. So far as he is concerned, everything is made of gold. And this gold takes various shapes and forms and therefore assumes various names. And so we call them by different names. Similarly, in Vedanta, the cause never really becomes the effect. The cause only appears to have become the effect. That's an important principle. And this is This is technically called by a famous name. It's called Vivartavada. Vivartavada means false modification, not real modification. The examples for false modifications, as I said, you know the old example, a room which is dimly light. There is not enough light, dimly lit. There is not light enough light. The door is half closed, the windows are half closed, and there is something lying on the floor which resembles a roof by its shape and the way it's coiled up. And you mistake it to be a snake. Now, the rope has not become the snake, but due to ignorance, due to absence of enough light, we mistake the rope to be the snake. The rope has not really become the snake. In other ways, in reality, the gold has not become the ornament. Gold remains the gold. Gold may look like a ring, as if it has become a ring, but really the gold has not become the ring. Becoming means it has not modified itself into another entity. No. Gold remains a gold, which means gold, which means this modification is not real, it is false modification. Sometimes this is called transfiguration. Though this term, this English translation is not always accepted by traditional scholars, but the idea is this false modification is Vivartavada. Atman or Brahman, consciousness has not become this world. When we don't realize that there is only one reality in this world and that is consciousness or Atman, it's because we think that this world alone exists, or we think that Atman has become this world. But really, no, it has not become this world. It appears to have become. Swami Vivekananda says, when you look at Brahman or Atman through the prism, through the medium of time, space and causation, or it's called relativity, that absolute perfect Atman or Brahman is mistaken to be the world. And we falsely imagine this world has got an independent status, independent of Atman. But really this world has no independent status. Just as the snake that you by mistake superimpose upon the rope has no existence independent of the rope. Later when you bring the light, you realize there is no snake. Where do you deny, where do you negate the snake? You are negating the snake on the very entity which you mistook to be the snake. What I mistook earlier to be the snake is in fact the rope only. So, that's why in Vedanta there is a famous book, Advaita Siddhi, famous book, one of the most complicated polemical dialectical work written in the 16th century by a great author called Madhusudana Saraswati. So he refutes 5 definitions of, he refutes objections raised by the followers of Madhvacharya, like Vyasa Tirtha, Nyayamrita, etc. He refutes 5 objections raised by the objectors of Advaita, defending the 5 definitions given to Maya by Padmapada, Sriharsha, and Anandabodha, and Chitsukacharya, and so on. I will not go into those details. The one important point that's made is the negation of snake takes place on the rope, on the very entity which was mistaken to be the snake. The snake. Similarly, the negation of the world takes place in the world itself. For a liberated soul, for a Brahmajnani, even when he or she lives in this world, looking at the world, he will be seeing only Brahman or consciousness. He won't be seeing the world. The world that we see is seen by him in a different light. What we mistake to be the reality, the only reality, this passing, this changing, the fleeting phenomena, the ever-changing, ever-moving phenomena, empirical phenomena, which we mistake to be real, is seen by him to be Brahman. So, those who have seen, if you read the works of some of these American disciples who went to see Ramana Maharshi will be sitting there staring at something, looking at something. So what he is looking at? He was not looking at this world. The world that we see is not seen to be the world by him. When he was staring at this world, he looks like a man who is staring at something. But what he is seeing is Brahman or Atman itself. That is called the state of Sahaja Samadhi. Sometimes he called in Ramana Maharshi's life. So, the negation of world is done on the very entity which you mistake to be the reality. Now, this point to be understood in the 12th verse. Sumayaya. Sumaya means by its own maya. Consciousness or Atman creates this world by his own power. It is not something external. And projects. And then that consciousness itself, when it reflects in the intellect of people, cognizes these manifold entities as changing worldly phenomena. When that jiva, that individual soul, through spiritual practices, realizes the truth that he is in fact the consciousness or Atman itself, the immanent principle. And that Atman is seen to be this manifold empirical phenomena. That moment he realizes that he is one with the supreme reality, Atman. This is the point. So it's called Vivartavada, false modification, not real modification. There is a doctrine of real modification, and that doctrine was held by the other school of thought. It's called Ramanuja's Visishtadvaita, the qualified monist, and also by thinkers like Sankhya, the Sankhya school of philosophers. There also another school of which is called Jnana Karma Samuccayavada. Some of the earlier schools of philosophers in India, they argued that Brahman really becomes the world. And they gave the example of milk becoming curd. Milk actually becomes curd. Curd cannot go back to milk. When there is curd in front of you, it is entirely different from milk. So it's called an example for parinama or real modification. This doctrine was held by the followers of Visishtadvaitins, Ramanujites and others. But according to Vedanta, according to Advaita Vedanta, according to the school of Shankaracharya, modification is only false modification, not real modification. This is the point to be understood. But in both these two schools of thought, in the school of Parinamavada, which is called the school of, who held the doctrine of real modification, and in the school of false modification, which is called Vivartavada, which doctrine was held by the Advaitins. In both these schools, there is one common factor. Both these schools of philosophers believed that effect is already existing in cause. Effect already exists in cause. The effect doesn't come from outside. According to Advaitins, the reality as the cause appears to have become the effect, this world, that is false modification theory. According to Ramanujites and others who held the Parinamavada doctrine, they believed Brahman or God becomes this world. This idea behind. Some of the students last time suggested this idea. After taking classes for some time, I would rather give you some time to ask questions and to clarify your doubts. If any of you want any points to be discussed or clarified, you can raise your doubts. We will have some kind of an interaction. Any of you related to any of the ideas which I have been discussing all these days. I had dealt with different schools of Buddhist and other different schools of thought from the standpoint of comparative philosophy. So if you have got any doubt, any points that you want me to discuss, to elaborate, to clarify further, I shall be happy to do that. Any point to be discussed.
You just said that in Ramanuja's school, the Parinamavada, the effect is inherent in the cause, and that God has actually become the world.
Yes.
So in that sense, would you say that it is similar to the Western school of thought of pantheism?
In Western school and pantheism, God is equated to nature. Nature itself, because God doesn't become God. Nature itself is God. Ramanuja, the school of real modification, the doctrine of real modification, which is held by the Ramanujites and Sankhyas and others, is different from pantheism. Because they believe that, according to Ramanuja, there is a difference between even these two schools of Parinamavada. The Sankhya school of Parinamavada is actually different from Ramanuja's school of Parinamavada, means real modification. But commonalities also is there. Both believe in real modification. That's the commonality, the common factor. Now in pantheism, you don't think of a God other than this nature. Not that God becomes this nature. Nature itself is equated to God. But in Ramanuja philosophy, Vasudeva or Narayana, as he calls, is God with form, God with attributes, God with all potentialities. That God becomes this world and also all the living beings and remain within him. There is a distinction. Ramanuja admits a clear distinction between God and the world and also living beings, but that distinction, that difference is not the difference of Madhva or Vedic schools of thought, the dualistic school of thought. Ramanuja says jivas or individual souls and the world and all the manifold entities in the world live within God, but different. Apruthak siddhi, it is called Ramanuja doctrine. Means there is a kind of non-difference, but there is also a difference. There is a difference, but there is also a non-difference. So apruthak siddhi is called. A technical expression which Ramanuja uses to explain this subtle this combination of difference and non-difference. Non-different, that's called, it is Visishta Advaita, means Chit Achit Visishta Advaita. It is a kind of monism, but qualified by the distinction. It is compared to a fruit. In a fruit, there is the seed, and then there is the shell, the outer shell, the flesh, and all that. They all live within, but there is a difference. So Ramanuja doesn't accept the Advaitin's concept of complete identity between individual soul and Brahman. No. An individual soul can never become the same as Brahman. Up to Sayujya he can go. Sayujya is not complete identity. Sayujya, not Tadatmya. Advaitins believe when you reach the supreme realization, you experience your complete identity with the supreme reality. In Ramanuja's philosophy, you can reach only up to Sayujya level. Sayujya level, the first level is Salokya, then Samipya, then Sarupya. So you can go to God's world, Vishnu Loka, Lord of Vishnu, Vish's world, and you can be near him. You can have his form. And according to some of the latest schools of Vaishnavites, according to Bhagavata, you can have some of the potentialities and attributes of God, which is called Sarshti. Bhagavata only accepts that. Ramanuja doesn't mention that. And then you can have most of these attributes. You got the form of God, nearness, close proximity, and all that. But you can never become one with the Supreme Reality. That complete identity is never accepted by Ramanuja. But in pantheism, it is a kind of, we may call it is a kind of monism, because you don't think of God. Nature is equated to God. And perhaps I think, this kind of elaborate, intricate, dialectical or polemical ideas perhaps did not exist in pantheism. Pantheism, the word was used by Max Muller also to explain the concept, the evolution of Vedic pantheon in a different sense. So this is entirely different. Parinamavada is different from pantheism. Ramanuja school of Parinamavada believes God himself becomes all the living beings and also this manifold empirical world. And according to Sankhyas, the Prakriti of Pradhanam, this is the evolving principle, which is unconscious but it works. Of course, this is not logically acceptable to Advaitins. Of course, still I am just giving an explanation. And out of this Pradhanam of Prakriti, the entire manifold empirical phenomena evolves. All the 22 principles evolve. And when they evolve, they become totally different from, the evolutes become completely different from the entity from which evolutes evolve. In Ramanuja theory, there is difference and also non-difference. But in Sankhya philosophy, there is complete non-difference, because when these things evolve out of Prakriti, they become totally different. So that's the main difference. I hope it's clear to you.
Yes, Swamiji, you're talking about this difference and non-difference of Ramanuja.
Ramanuja, yes. Non-difference because all Jiva and Jagat exist within God. Mm-hmm. So there is a kind of non-difference. But they can never be the same as God. So that's the idea. Jiva and Jagat exist in God. That's why the example of fruit is given. That's given by Ramanuja. Fruit. Everything exists within fruit. But they're different. The seed is different. Flesh is different. Everything is different. So, this Ramanuja school of Visishtadvaita is not a new doctrine. It already existed in so many forms in earlier, in the works of earlier philosophers. So, in pantheism, it cannot be equated with Parinamavada. In pantheism, there is no such thing as God evolving into empirical phenomena. But in Ramanuja, God himself evolves and becomes these individual souls, all these living beings, and also all the entities in the empirical world. And they exist within God. So there is non-difference in the sense they all exist in close proximity with God. There is difference because they can never be the same as God. That's the idea.
So the example given there for Parinamavada is the milk becoming transformed into curd?
Milk becoming curd. It is not very accurate in the case of Ramanuja. It is accurate only in the context of this, this Sankhya Parinamavada and other school of thought is Brahma Parinamavada. That's I'm going to those details. So, but Ramanuja believes in the sense that these jivas, these individual souls and empirical phenomena, they can never become the same as God. So there is a difference which can never be negated, which will never cease to exist. but they don't have an existence independent of God. They don't have an existence independent of God. So there is an intricate philosophy of relationship between the individual beings, empirical phenomena, and God in Ramanuja.
But they have the same substance.
Substance is God Himself. God Himself. That's the idea behind. But then they're entirely different. So their only parinama, modification, is real. Why? Because they can never be the same. See, curd can never go back to the status of milk. So in that sense, modification is real. Any other?
You said that the effect is always part of the cause. So are you saying that Maya has always existed? It never began?
Yes.
Is that ignorance?
The Maya needs a lot of explanation. In fact, Maya is something which really doesn't exist. But we understand that Maya doesn't exist only when we are out of Maya. So I will explain this by explaining these two letters which constitute the word Maya. See, Ma, Ya. Ma actually negates, doesn't exist. Ya is a pronoun. You don't use a pronoun to refer to something which doesn't exist at all. So it exists, but really doesn't exist. Now, for anyone living in this world, from a common sense point of view, if you look at the world is a reality. Every moment is changing. Every moment is changing. Everything is a fleeting, changing phenomenon. Still we think the world is real. Now, we understand, in fact, it is not intellectual cognition. It is a cognition taking place at the level of experience. When we realize that there is a supreme consciousness, which is the only reality, and that reality is our own true nature, and apart from that reality, there is nothing in this world as an absolute reality. At that experience level, this Maya ceases to exist. That's why the Maya, the word itself is this. Something really doesn't exist, but we, every moment of our life, experience that it is a reality. Then when do we come out of this? When we go beyond Maya, when we transcend Maya, then we realize this Maya, this relative is relative. In other words, the relativity of the relative is realized only when you go beyond relative, when you experience the absolute. So, in fact, one of the grandest definitions of Maya comes in Shankaracharya's Viveka-Chudamani. His explanation is something which is neither existence nor non-existence, neither part nor whole, and so on. And ultimately he says it is something which is beyond definition. In a way, can you think of any other explanation to the world in which we are living, the world of which we are a part? We know the world is real. That's how we experience from the relative empirical point of view. But if you read any books on physics, modern physics, from a purely scientific point of view, this world is not reality, because every moment it is changing. So anything which is changing cannot be real in the absolute sense. As I said earlier, what is subject to change can never be real in the true sense of the term. And world is changing. The galaxies are still changed. Maybe it may take trillions of years, but they will change. So the entire cosmos of which we are a part is within Maya. But then, the moment we come out of textbooks or meditation, we are stepping into the world of Maya, which is experienced to be real. So when do we realize the relativity or the illusoriness of this world? Only when we go beyond it. Then we understand Maya really did not exist. See, I said this is explained sometimes in the light of the famous analogy of rope and snake. If there is not enough light in the room and doors are closed, there is something coiled up, you mistake the piece of rope which is lying there to be the snake, and then sometimes you may run and you may call somebody, and you may even hurt yourself while running away from the snake. And then when you bring light, you realize it is only a piece of rope. Now the question arises, when did this snake come into existence? How somebody asked the question? Your answer is the snake did not come into existence. The snake did not go away because the snake was not there to begin with. But then this you realize only when you bring light. Before you brought light, you did not know that it was a piece of rope and not snake. Similarly, the illusoriness or relativity of Maya or the empirical phenomena is realized only when we transcend the realm of Maya, not before. So the best definition of Maya is that it cannot be defined. Once we understand that definition, then you can try to Maya any way you like. But you have to keep in mind, Maya cannot be defined. That is the ultimate definition. Then that's why it's called so Mayaya. But this Maya is not an external agency. This Maya is within the power of Atman. This Maya is within the power of Atman. This Maya is not an external agency. Therefore, that's why it is said, the effect has no independent existence apart from the existence of cause. In other words, there is no effect. If you say the effect is the same as cause, what does it mean? There is no effect. And if you say there is not effect, then there is no cause, because the idea of something being an effect is logical only in relation to something which is the cause. That is why Advaita, the last conclusion of Advaita, it is not a conclusion, it is a matter of experience, is that the Supreme Consciousness, the Atman, is the only reality which is the immanent principle, the all-pervading, the transcendental principle. This is the idea behind. Once, in fact, all the great teachers, like Shankaracharya, Sri Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, they all realized this, but still they worked. And when they worked for the good of the world. That's the idea behind it. Gaudapada also says, you realize this truth, but then you don't go to sleep. You work for the good of the world, realizing that the world is really not real, that sense. Otherwise, I think, yes, now we will come back to the text. Now we will come to the 13th verse. Vikaroti aparan bhavan andaschitte vyavasthidan niyatamsa bahischitta evam kalpayade prabhu. This is the 13th verse. Now, if you split the Sanskrit verse, it will be something like this. Here the word Prabhu is used. Prabhu, in the verse, which means Atman. So, this Atman, Antaha chitte vyavasthidan aparan bhavan vikaroti evam niyatamcha behishchittaha kalpayate. The idea is this. This Atman, he projects the external things. When this Atman turns his mind outward and imagines, then it creates all these external things. And then it creates all these different entities. Not only the earth and other entities, but also all other invisible beings like thought currents and so on. Here, the point to be remembered is this, two types of creation are mentioned here. One is called internal creation, the other is called external creation. When mind and senses are involved, it is the creation of external objects. The mind and senses are together involved, it leads to the creation of external objects. Because when our five senses of perception and mind join together, we perceive external things. These two should always come together. If the eyes are not working, if mind alone is working, we can't see or we can't have any external objects, visible objects. And if eyes are staring at something, if mind is not there, then also we don't cognize external objects. So, two types of creation. One is external creation, in which mind and senses are both involved. The other is internal creation, in which mind alone is involved. Now, for example, what exactly happens, it's said here. First, mind alone is involved. When a painter tries to paint a picture, he has to imagine in his mind the shape, the color, and all the details of the painting that he is going to paint. So also, if a pot maker wants to make a pot, he has to visualize in his mind the characteristics, the shape of the pot that he is going to make. Their mind alone is involved. And then, after getting a clear picture, mental picture of what he is going to make, the pot maker may bring his instruments and clay, or the painter may take the brush and the colors. So, these are two types of creations that are mentioned here. First, mental creation, the creation of external objects with mind and senses. Of course, that takes place later, not first. Before mind and senses are both involved, the creator or anyone who does something, who undertakes a task, will have to get a clear picture of what he is going to make. So first he has to mentally visualize what he is going to create, what he is going to make. This is called internal creation. And then external creation. Then when he really wants to do the work, he needs not only the mind but also the senses. The author says, but all these creations are taking place only at mental level. Because even in the case of external creation, it only follows an internal creation. The painter first imagines the painting he is going to make, then he gives practical shape to it. Both these creations are taking place only with the help of mind. So both are mental projections. So we have to remember the original goal of Gaudapada. Gaudapada wants to establish that waking state experiences are as unreal as dream state experiences. Creating a mental picture of something is equivalent to seeing a dream, imagination or memory. And then giving visual shape to that painting with the help of brush and colors based on the imagination, the earlier imagination, is equivalent to the objects that we see in waking state. Both are nothing but mental projections. Therefore, if dream objects are unreal, then waking state experiences also should be unreal. In that case, can we argue that the world in which we live is real? If the world in which we is not real, then there is no creation. So Gaudapada is making use of every possible argument to establish his doctrine of non-origination of this world, which is called Ajadavada in Gaudapada Karika. As I said earlier, Gaudapada's thesis is there is only one reality, and that Brahman, that Atman, and from the highest point of view, the empirical phenomena are as unreal as imaginations or dreams. That is this thesis. Now, he is taking up a very, very important argument, which is a very subtle argument from a purely metaphysical point of view. It comes in the 14th verse. Chittakala hi ye antastu duyakala ye bahi kalpida evate sarve vishesho na anyahetukaha. If you split it, ye antaha tu ye eva bahi duyakalaha te sarve kalpitaha visheshaha na anyahetukaha. Now, see, the Advaitins argued that the experiences of waking state are as unreal as the experiences of the dream state. A non-Advaitin is raising another objection against Advaitin's thesis. This objection is this. See, in waking state and dream state, just we have to keep our mind on the original premise, the doctrine which Gaudapada is trying to establish. The doctrine is this: waking state experiences are as unreal as dream experiences. This is the philosophical doctrine which Gaudapada wants to establish. But there are many schools of thought who won't agree with this thesis. So one objector, one non-Advaitic school of philosophy raises this objection. Now, see, just imagine. In dream, we have only one time concept. Something as a flash, suddenly we experience something like a flash. See, people may dream that they're walking in the sky, but that only is a single event. Now, in waking state, it's not like that. X so Y, and Y can recognize X. See, if two friends are walking in the street, even after that event, both of them may recollect and they may have the memory of meeting each other in the street. So, there is always a kind of a concordance. There is a mutual time factor involved. X sees Y in a street corner, and later both of them may recollect the event of meeting in the street corner. And before they met in the street corner, they may also talk about how they reached that particular place where these two friends happen to meet each other. Another example is given in the classical Shankara's commentary. In Shankara's commentary, he gives the example of, see, somebody is milking a cow, another person is sitting there. So he sat there till X finished milking the cow. Or he milked the cow as long as X sat there. X is not used by Shankaracharya, of course. No. He says this point, example. And one person is milking the cow, another person is sitting there. He sat there till the milking was over. Or he milked the cow as long as he sat there. Now there are two events, a kind of concordance, mutual time factor is there. Now this mutual time factor exists only in waking state, not in dream state. In dream state, suddenly like a flash something comes and it vanishes immediately. There is no antecedent and there is no precedent. There is nothing before that, there is nothing after that. But in waking state, there can be an antecedent, there can be a precedent. Before it took place, see, we can say that person sat there when the other person was milking the cow. Now, if you ask both these persons, they will have two types of explanations. The man who milked the cow will tell you, well, he sat there so long as I was milking the cow. The man who sat there would tell you, well, he was milking the cow so long as I was sitting there. So you can see two types of time factor. Rather, two approaches towards the time involved in this particular event. So this is an objection raised by a non-Advaitic philosopher. So he says, this non-Advaitic philosopher says, this difference shows that waking state experience is not as unreal as dream state experience. There is a difference. That is argument. Okay. Now, the Advaitins' argument is this. Both are related to mental projections. Now, in dream also you can have such differences. In dream also you can have this kind of, in dream also you can dream that you are milking the cow and your friend came and sat there. Or the other way, you sat there and when your friend was milking the cow. So these experiences are possible in dream also. In dream it is at the mental level. Dream experiences are all mental projections where senses of perception, senses of action are not involved. But still, it is all mental projection only. So also in waking state. But for the dreamer, this mutual time factor exists. But they're existing only as mental projections, that's all. So also in waking state. Waking state also, it is the way we analyze with our mind that makes the difference. So Advaitins argues, this difference doesn't count. Just as you have multiple time factor in waking state, so also you can have multiple time factor, multiple time limitations in dream state. Only the point is, in dream state, it is pure mental projection. In waking state, it is just it is a real event. But the reality of the event is only from the waking state point of view. The dream experience is real for the dreamer, just as the waking experience is real for the person in waking state. That is the counter-argument of the Advaitins. So the objection falls to the ground. That is the point. There we are going to take it more elaborately, I believe. Time is up. Okay, next. Okay, now, here there are a few terms that you have to remember that should be clearly understood. A few terms are used here. These are technical terms. Now, Chittakala actually means, Chitta means mind or thoughts. Chittakala means mind or thought, something which exists only as a thought or a mental projection. So, the objection is this. These objects which remain only as long as thought exists are in the mind only, in dream. Now, those objects which are the objects of recognition, mutual recognition, exist for an earlier period and also for a later period in waking state. Because one can say, he didn't come till I started milking the cow. Or the other person say, I left when he finished milking the cow. So there are multiple time factors in waking state. But the Advaitins' argument is, the point is that the argument is put in the third verse, Kalpida evate sarve. All these are due to imaginations only. They are all imagined. Even the external things are only imagination. Imagination in what sense? Imagination, everything. Imagination means everything from the mental point of view. It's only mental projection. That's all. It is mental projection plus senses in waking state. It is mental projection minus senses in dream state. That's the only difference. Okay. Now we'll come to the next verse. They're all interrelated. These ideas are related. The main points which Gaudapada wants to drive home is this. In waking state, everything is external. In dream state, everything is internal, only mental projection. In waking state, senses of action, senses of perception, and mind are involved. In dream state, only mind is involved. Waking state experiences are external, dream state experiences are internal. Another point is, waking state experiences take long time. If you want to travel 1,000 miles, you may need 2 hours. But in dream, it takes only a split second. It doesn't make much difference. Traveling 10,000 miles or 1 yard or 1 feet doesn't make any difference. In dream state, everything is mental. Then, waking state experiences are of a gross nature. Dream state experiences are of a subtle nature. Another, in waking state experiences, there is an element of practical utility. You can read books, you can discuss, you can pray. All these spiritual practices are possible in waking state, but in dream state, these things are not possible. The reason is, in dream there is no deliberation. In dream we are helpless. Thought flashes in the chitta. We are helpless. In waking state also we are helpless because thanks to Maya. But the main difference is, deliberation is possible to some extent, in a relative sense, in waking state. It is not possible in dream state. Another point is, in waking state, it is clear, visible, obvious. In dream state, it is not clear. The main difference is, waking state experiences involve senses of action and senses of perception. Dream state experiences involve only mental projection. That's the main difference. These are the main differences. So these are the main points that he would elaborate in the coming few verses till he reaches up to 19th verse. From 20th verse onwards, for almost 9 verses, from 20th to 28th verse, Gaudapada gives a long list of 36 types of superimpositions, referring to 36 minor schools of thought. Some of them were major schools, of course. All the schools of Buddhism, Jainism, and ancient Indian materialist schools, and also other fringe philosophical groups are also referred to by Gaudapada in these 9 verses from 20 to 28 verses, referring to 35 and according to a subtle difference 36 different arguments related to the different superimpositions on Brahman. Now we'll come to 15th verse. Avyakta evayen tastu sphuda eva chaye bahi kalpida evate sarve visheshastu indriyantere. This meaning here. So, ye tu antaha avyaktaha eva ye cha bahi sphuda te sarve kalpidaha visheshastu indriyantere. The argument is simple. I already explained this earlier. Sometimes in dream things are seen as avyakta, means not very clear. And in waking state things are seen as very clear events, entities. But this difference is only related to the involvement of senses. Those that are in the mind may seem to be unmanifested, and those outside external entities may appear to be manifested. But this difference is only in the internal sense organs and external sense organs. Why? Because in dream experiences, senses are not involved, only mind, and in waking state experiences, senses are involved. Of course, mind also is involved. Okay, now we'll come to 16th verse. Jivam kalpayade purvam tato bhavan pruthak vidhan bahyan adhyadbhigamschaiva yada vidyas tada smritihi. So this projection is being explained here. First, this Atman, this consciousness, which is by its very nature without form, without name, without definition, without attributes, which is the immanent, transcendental and omnipresent reality, it projects itself to be conditioned, and this conditioned consciousness is called individual soul or Jivatma. And then the moment this Jiva or individual soul comes into existence, immediately the characteristics, attributes, impressions and tendencies of each Jiva come into existence, and they create external and internal experiences. That means all the experiences that we have, all the interests, all the thought currents that we have something to do with the residue of the events and actions that we have performed or experiences that we had in the past. And they project themselves in the form of memories, tendencies and impressions, and accordingly we create this external world and internal world. Internal sensations, happiness, misery, all. And also external events which are projected outside and which are interpreted according to our tendencies and impressions. All depend upon our own actions, impressions and our own memories. As I said earlier, this is an important point in understanding the 16th verse. Every Jiva has got this external gross body, and also there is a subtle entity which is called Sukshma Sharira, a subtle entity which is not visible but which is much more powerful and which actually constitutes our character, and it decides and determines the way we behave, the way we act, the way we respond to different things. This subtle body consists of 17 entities. It is called Sukshma Sarira. The 5 senses of perception, 5 senses of action, and this, what do you call it, these 5 pranas, vital energies. So total 15 plus mind and intellect. These 17. It is called subtle body. They constitute the character. In so how we behave, how we act, what we think, where does lie our interests, what are our natural tendencies. All these are decided by these accumulated memories, which constitute an important aspect of Sukshma Sharira. Of course, this is explained in a much more scientific and more comprehensive manner by Shankaracharya in Viveka, where he calls this subtle entity by another name. It is called Puri Ashtakam. Means it is a it is a vehicle which has got 8 units. The Sukshma Sharira, which I explained earlier, consisting of 17 elements, are already included in this. Which are these 8 units? If we understand this, we can understand our own human personality and character. The one set is 5 senses of action, 5 senses of perception, we already know. And then the 5 elements which constitute the human body, and 5 vital energies. And then, so these are to be considered to be 4 units. The 5th unit is mind, intellect, it is called chittam or ego sense. Mind with which we speculate and think and imagine. Intellect with which we cognize things, perceive things. Chittam, which is the repository of all accumulated tendencies, impressions, vasanas, like a lake. And the ego sense, when we identify ourselves to be X, Y, Z, etc. So these are the 5. Then there are 3 more. Ignorance. Ignorance means the ignorance which causes all misunderstandings. We think ourselves to be this body, this mind, intellect, and so on. We forget the fact that we are the supreme consciousness, that we are the Atman, that we are the all-pervading reality. That we forget. This avidya, it's called ignorance. And then in its place, we superimpose so many other things. Gaudapada refers to, as I said earlier, refers to 36 types of superimpositions. So, total now we have come to 6 elements. Because of this ignorance, out of this ignorance, we develop different desires for worldly enjoyments, worldly objects, etc. Fleeting things. Avidya kama means ignorance and a desire. And because of this desire, we do many things, and they get us bound to this chain of bondage more and more. This mechanism is called the Puri Ashtakam. So, when the all-pervading, immanent consciousness, Atman, reflects through this, or functions through this Puri Ashtakam, it is called Jiva. Now, if a Jiva realizes, Jiva means individual soul, when it realizes its true nature, when it realizes that it is the all-pervading reality, the supreme consciousness, then it breaks these chains and comes out. And all spiritual practices are meant for breaking these chains. Breaking these chains which apparently mistake us to be so many other things, so many things other than our true reality, our true nature, which is Atman. So we will discuss this point later in next class. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om. That's Sri Ramakrishna Order.